Hello po sa ating lahat. How is everyone? Good evening there in the Philippines. I believe it's 7:12 p.m. there in the Philippines, and it is 7:12 a.m. here in Washington D.C. po. I hope you can hear me. Again, our own certificates are now working. So just wait for the Cultura code later on if you want to receive your certificates for um, Kapua. Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Really exciting day for our episode 8 on Kolekteratura Season 2. Title is Food History and its Applications to Social Studies, Civics, and Civics Education. Um, I can't wait to have this because this is our last episode for our Philippine Food Month. Okay, Philippine Food Month or Buwan ng Kalutong Pilipino. Yan, we're really excited for this event. Hello to those who are watching live. Sir Dennis Serso, thank you for joining us. Um, makulturang gabi po sa inyo diyan. Can't wait to again have this presentation. Would like to call on our Ma'am Andre right there. Just remove the banner. Hello po, Ma'am Andre. How are you?
Hello po, Sir Alan. Magandang gabi mga kultura, mga kapwa ko guro at sa kapwa ko sa buong mundo. Magandang gabi, isa na namang masayang gabi dito sa kapwa kasi ito ay last episode ng celebration natin for the Philippine Food Month, Sir Alan. Kamusta po dyan sa Washington?
Kan po, malamig. I don't know
Malamig.
why it's supposed to be spring already at saka malapit ng mag-summer pero hindi ko alam bakit ang lamig. Parang magwi-winter pa lang
Ay,
dito po
talaga.
sa Washington DC. Sobra.
Sa akin po dito
Oo.
masaya.
Diyan po, malamig din po ba sa Pilipinas?
Mainit po. As in may summer na summer.
Mainit.
Yes po. At saka sir, ngayong gabi po,
Oh,
I'm
wow.
privileged kasi desperas po ng fiesta namin dito sa Kalinog, Iloilo, sa aking barangay po. So,
Oh, wow.
medyo masayahin yung mga tao ngayon dahil tomorrow po fiesta namin.
Oh,
So, timing
I
naman
bet
po.
there's for you guys there's excitement there.
Yes po. Kasi Will sir, ano po, masaya kasi fiesta bukas at saka we're celebrating the Philippine Food Month. Pagkain po ang pag-uusapan natin ngayong gabi sa ating
Nice.
bisita. So siya po ay internationally awarded na nonfiction author whose works promote strengthening Filipino cultural identity as a foundational to global competitiveness. She is a pioneer in Philippine food history as an expression of handling change and finding contemporary opportunities from it. She has been a advocate for over 4 decades. Among her awarded books is in Excelsis, The Mission of Josepe Rizal, Humanist and Philippine National Hero, published by Studio 5 in 1996 to honor Jose Rizal's martyrdom centennial. The book topped the biography and book design categories at the National Book Award hosted by the Manila Critics Circle in 1997. In 2006, she authored The Governor General's Kitchen, Philippine Culinary Vignettes and Period Recipes, 1521 to 1935, released by Anvil Publishing. It was awarded Best Food Book and Best Design Book at the National Book Awards given in 2007 at Manila. The next it placed second in the food history category of Gourmand World Cookbook Awards presented in London. Our guest served as a commissioner on the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, Philippine Centennial Commission, and UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines. She has been a trustee on the boards of culture and cultural institutions that currently include the Philippine National Museum and Alliance Francois de Manil. She is she's received national and international awards. Among them are the Southeast Asian Right Award for Asian Writers and a knighthood in the Grand Order of Arts and Letters from the Republic of the France. Mga kapwa, let us welcome to Kolektoratura of Kapwa, an expert on Philippine food history and culture as we celebrate the Philippine Food Month this April. Mga kakultura, mga kapwa, let us welcome Ma'am Felice Prudente Santa Maria. Makulturang gabi po, Ma'am Felice.
Magandang
Thank you
gabi
po.
po. Magandang gabi po sa inyong
Hello po.
lahat.
Hello po. Really excited
And
today.
nako, thank you for spending your time with us today. I kind of want to get started because I
Yeah.
know that many of you are interested in, what is
Yeah,
she going
yeah,
to
yeah.
say about food? And before I begin, please try to think in your minds, no? Ano yung mga pinaka-favorito ninyong pagkain Filipino at why? Bakit yun yung mga favorito ninyong pagkain? Because I think as I know most of you are teachers, and of course we think of food as one way to explain to our students that the food that we're eating is important to bringing the family close together. We eat together. It's a social experience. Food also brings us comfort, and we continue to value the comfort that different kinds of foods give us. In addition, the foods that are made and eaten in our various localities, they are important to understanding local history and in helping members of that community, neighbors in that area, to develop a sense of place that is like a loyalty to the place, wanting to improve the place, wanting to keep its heritage, its local heritage intact. And this is part of the strength of the nation. So we know that food is our one of our part of our portable culture. We can bring our favorite foods made in our neighborhoods to different parts of the Philippines, to different parts of the world, and we can share these foods with other people, not necessarily with Filipinos. So the food becomes a statement. It's part of identity as an individual, a member of a family, a member of a neighborhood, member of a nation, an ethnicity. All that is what we find in our food. But tonight, I'm going to talk about something else first before we think of our favorite foods. And here, Alan is going to put on the screen the title of our talk. Here we go. So I'm going to share with you only three words: ginhawa, katimpian, and nayanaya. So let's move to the second one. This is really quite quick. Move to the second image, Alan. And since we're talking about social studies, and we know that the Department of Education has a spiral, and the idea is that we begin with the individual, we move to the family, the community, the nation, to the political region such as ASEAN, and then to the world. And so this is the spiral that our students are supposed to learn and be able to relate to. Well, cuisine is actually a culinary chain. It's a loop of social relations that are engaged in food production, distribution, consumption, waste management, and then it's supposed to loop back to food production. And all of this is for zero hunger and zero malnutrition. So it's a social group with a goal. In addition, the culinary chain is a loop of social relations, if we move to the next slide, that in the 21st century should apply sustainability to our social habits. And sustainability means that we meet the present needs, but without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. You know, sustainability has been a United Nations strategy for anti hunger, anti malnourishment for 38 years already. Now, let's move to the next image. So I'm going to show you three Filipino culinary concepts. These are not recipes. We're not going to talk about recipes today. We're going to talk about culinary concepts because I feel that as teachers, you need to help us move the understanding of how valuable our food culture is. While it is important to know our dishes, to keep our heritage dishes alive, there is a lot more, many precious reasons why we have to look into food history as having proof, having proof of who the Filipino is. So these three Filipino culinary concepts support social relationships and sustainability. Look at them. Ginhawa. We think of ginhawa as comfortable living, well-being, and freedom from want. Katimpian, which is Tagalog for temperance, moderation, and self-control. Again, these are important to harmonious social relations. And the last one, which in Cebu is Naya Naya, and Mama Andre said that in Hiligaynon or Ilonggo, it's Naya Naya. So pardon my accent. But this is a very important word. It means happiness, kindness, and contentment that we gain because we feed others. It sounds so Filipino, doesn't it? Now, let's get to ginhawa, which is magaang ang buhay, kapwa kapakanan, mutual well-being, nagdadamayan tayo, no? We feel the mutuality of a situation. But this ginhawa, take a look at the next image. Ginhawa had a different meaning once upon a time. Okay, the next image will show you that if one studies the early Spanish colonial times, there were actually like three different diets, and these three diets converged in order to help us acquire a sense of happiness, kindness, and contentment. And the first of the diets was ginhawa, meaning good physical health that came from feeding the physical self, the physical body. So while today we think of ginhawa in a big, in a much broader sense, it actually began by meaning giving food to the body para walang gutom. If you'll notice, so that's 1613, and then look, 1628, that's in Visayan. We have Alonso Mentrida. And he says, okay, it's the same as in Tagalog. Ginhawa is food in general, food to feed the body. It is anti-gutom, okay? But look at it. He has another meaning. Ginhawaan, birth, breath, the spirit of life of a person, which means that we don't only feed the physicality. We feed the spirit. We feed both physical and metaphysical realms. Now let's look at the next image. This ginhawa, feeding of the physical self, also fed the emotion, which is why nagiginhawa meant it acquired the meaning of pleasurable eating of many different kinds of foods, which one had during a fiesta. And that's probably why it is so embedded in our identity and embedded in our sense of pleasure that the all-you-can-eat buffet is such a big hit among Filipinos, because the all-you-can-eat buffet is very much like the fiesta. And again, to back up the sense that we like to have diversity in food, we get bored. There are words, by the way, throughout the archipelago, old words that mean getting bored with food because the menu is always the same every day. But tamasa, if you look, this is Cebuano from 1851. The word tamasa meant that we were eating many delicacies and that we would mix different ulam, we would mix it on one plate. Now, if one lives and eats in other countries, they don't eat that way. They will have one plate for one ulam, another plate for another ulam. They might serve one ulam now and then bring in another ulam. You don't mix all of them on a plate. With us, not only different ulams, but that's it, even fruit. We have a fruit on the side. In addition, we have a lot of the sausawans, the pickles, all of these things. And we put them on our plate. See, so it's really buffet style. And this again proves it, the presence of the word tamasa. But look what happened to the word ginhawa. Alan will move to the next image, and this might surprise you. Ginhawa became a political objective. Let's look at the next slide. Do we remember the KKK of Andres Bonifacio? That's the next slide. Let's see if we can get the next slide. There. So we have the KKK, the famous KKK, making kaginhawaan a political objective. And let's see how they did it. The next image that Alan will show us is the beginning and the end of the famous work, Ang Dapat Mabatid na Mga Tagalog, written by Andres Bonifacio. And please remember, he didn't mean Tagalog as only one ethnic group. This is where a lot of people get bogged down. Bonifacio did not want to use the word Filipinas because it was so associated with the colonial power. It was a Spanish name for our geographical entity, for our political entity. So he was thinking, well, it's Tagalog meant taga-ilog, ang mga taga maraming ilog, because when you look at Pampanga, means people from the riverbank. Lanao is people from the Maranao, or people of the lake. So in his mind, he meant Tagalog as a much broader word, but the word Tagalog is what he used. And look at the words in yellow or in gold. That is where I emphasized his use of the word kaginhawaan. And he begins the start of his Ang Dapat Mabatid ng Mga Tagalog, that before the Spanish arrived, this was their framework for political emancipation. That before the Spanish arrived, the land where all of these people of the water and the lakes lived, they had absolute prosperity and comfort. Lubos na kasaganaan at kaginhawaan. Absolute prosperity and comfort. Absolute abundance and kaginhawaan as well-being. And then he goes on towards the end. At the bottom, you will notice that is the ending already of his work. And he says, mga kababayani, oh, my co-heroes. I think that's such a beautiful word. Saying, look, we're all courageous. We are all bayani for the sake of our different peoples of the waters. And he says, please let us open our minds that have gotten blind. And let us expand the excellence and the strength of true and complete faith that we will triumph, that we are going to triumph. Our KKK is going to triumph in creating this idealistic well-being for the land where we were born. The minimithing kaginhawaan ng bayang tinubuan. That we will have this idealistic well-being, this idealistic kaginhawaan for the land where we were born. So kaginhawaan, that started out as food for the physical body, that became food for the spiritual body, that became many kinds of food to please the emotions as well as the gana or the appetite, now takes on a different meaning. It's bigger. It is the kaginhawaan, the well-being. Now, if we switch, let's switch slides or switch images. Alan will do that. And this next slide explains that the Katipunan philosophy combines spiritual ideals with patriotic ardor. So now put yourself in their place in 1892, 1896, 1898. Katwiran, which means reason, truth, and straightness. Okay, Katwiran protects freedom, protects kalayaan, so that all her people, kalayaan was seen as a woman. So straightness, reason, and truth protect freedom so that all her people might enjoy buong kaginhawaan, full contentment, freedom from want, well-being, mutual well-being. But the Katipunan warned, freedom that is not founded on reason, freedom that is not founded on the straight path, freedom that is not founded on truth is going to fail because well-being, because kaginhawaan requires moral rectitude. Isn't that beautiful? That is what happened to kaginhawaan. From feeding the body to feeding the nation and reminding us that moral rectitude is required of us. So let's look at the next image, which summarizes part one, which is about the word kaginhawaan. Kaginhawaan as a culinary concept. Food that feeds the body, food that feeds the spirit, food that feeds the emotion, food that feeds the nation. So, in the ongoing history that you and I, that all of us are still making, this history to find well-being through foods. We don't want anybody to be hungry. We don't want anyone to be malnourished. So this ongoing history to find well-being through food, through that, does each one of us create social relationships? Social relationships, that's what Araling Panlipunan is about. Social relationships with the religious, the spiritual, with other people, with groups. And going back to our need for sustainability, people's relationship to their natural environment. All in one word, all in one culinary concept, kaginhawaan. But now we go to another word. Alan is going to help us through this. And here is a Tagalog word that is very important today. It is katimpian, pigil, hinaon, control, self-discipline, actually, when you think about it. And here we have at the bottom, you have the different synonyms in some of our other Philippine languages. So katimpian is Tagalog, no? Now let's move to the next image where we see that katimpian is actually what we call temperance. And temperance is a strategy to prevent hunger through self-discipline. It's not only a strategy to prevent hunger through self-discipline, it is a strategy to prevent ill health through self-discipline. So we have proof here that there are many words there on the screen for you to see that hunger was a constant societal challenge. People always were having problems trying to feed their communities. And now it becomes even more difficult because now people are not just planting and getting their fish and harvesting from the forest. You can't really do that in all parts of the Philippines anymore. Life has become more complicated. And so now people have to buy food. And if they aren't working and they have no money, how are they going to eat? So this idea of trying to be sure that there's always food security, this is very important. But working with food security, we also need to see katimpian. We need to see control as working into the whole new concept of what is food security. Let's move on. And here maybe this will make it a little clearer. During the start of Christianity in the Philippines, gluttony was introduced as a concept by the Spanish friars. And they were warning. They said, if you become a glutton, if you eat too much, if you drink too much lambanog, if you drink too much tuba, what's going to happen is not only that you're going to get, your tummy's going to get big, you're going to get bundat and all of that. You might have buli. No, that's only part of it. The good thing about getting used to eating too much and drinking too much is that you might want too much of everything. Your whole morality will be one of greed in everything. This is their explanation. No? And so the gluttony in 1593, when the very first prayer book, and the first prayer book, Catechetical Aid, was published. It's called Doctrina Christiana in 1593. The word that was selected by the missionaries for gluttony was the kapalalaon in Tagalog. But as you can see in 1613, this is also Tagalog. No? These are from very old dictionaries, as you can see. This is the kind of research I do. I look for written proof, written evidence, not anecdotal, not oral history. I look for something written and something official. So the other words for gluttony were katakawan, matakaw, palakain. And I think if you think about it today, for instance, some of the illnesses that our public is suffering is because of that. Because of a lack of the ability to say, I have to stop eating too much of this because it's too much sugar. I am going to get diabetes. I am going to keep feeding my family this because they like it, but is it good for them? We're not saying deprive anyone, but we're saying put back into the mind the idea that maybe some amount of temperance is needed. And temperance is not a new word for us. We have it in our culture. Look at that word, hayat, from Panay. So that was curbing the appetite or suffering hunger, either for virtue, such as in fasting, for instance, or suffering hunger, unfortunately, because there was nothing to eat. Then look at the word tilo, not eating more than what was enough. So in our own culture, we already had a sense of temperance, a sense of too much, a sense of too little, and a sense of just enough. Now, if we move to the next image, the Christian missionaries, they explained that fasting, abstinence, and feasting were part of the whole Christian calendar. And they were trying to introduce that by feasting, by abstaining, by fasting, one was regulating one's behavior, and by being careful about one's behavior, by regulating one's behavior, then one could be temperate, one could be moderate. That was the whole idea. Because they in those days they were very concerned about having such strong bodily desires, and they wanted the spirit. They wanted the spiritual, the spirit of the person, the spiritual aspect, to counter anything that might be too sensual. So that was the framework that they were coming out of. And we need to remember that nobody forced us to use the new ingredients that the Spanish brought. Nobody forced us to eat any of the Spanish food. No one did. There must have been something about it that we liked, and I have a whole paper on that I presented last year. The lure of liking and being liked, the story of colonial cuisine at the end of the 19th century. But you see, what did they ask of us? The only thing that the Spanish asked of us was actually out of Roman Catholicism. And they said, we want you to abstain from meat on specific days. And we want you to eat pork on specific days. Now, eating pork in medieval and Renaissance Spain meant that you were neither Muslim nor Jew. They wanted to keep their country Roman Catholic. And in fact, they had only one religion. They only allowed one religion at the time. If you were not Roman Catholic, you would be persecuted. That was what it was like before. No freedom of religion. But eating pork was proof that you were neither Jew nor Muslim. Now, for us, eating pork wasn't a problem, because even before we became Christian, even before we became Islam, we were eating pork. We were sacrificing pork to our pagan gods, and we were told that our pagan gods liked to eat pork just as much as they liked to eat rice cakes, and just as much as they liked to drink tuba or rice wine, you see. So these are carryovers. It was very easy for us, therefore, to like lechon and associate it with feasting. But let's move on to the next image. And we show that katimpian is an effective strategy when there is food security, especially when there is food security during emergencies, both regular and unexpected. Now, by eating with temperance, with thoughtful restraint, even if there is food security, we are making sure that there's enough food for other people. So this is our 16th slide, number 16, where it says katimpian is effective as a strategy when there is food security. And by eating with temperance or thoughtful restraint, there can be enough food for others. And I remember when Leyte had that terrible destruction, when the waves came over and destroyed everything. You might remember there was this little boy. He was orphaned. And he found another little boy, smaller than he was. And he took this little boy and turned him into like his little brother. And I remember it. I was ready to cry because all they had was like a little piece of bread that they had gotten from the relief goods. And the older boy was dividing it between the two of them. So while it is true that this is temperance because you're forced to be temperate, there's not enough to eat, there is still the idea of the temperance creating this idea of sharing, eating only what is necessary, only what is enough. Now, in the next image, I bring up the Commonwealth of the 1930s. This is the era of President Quezon, which, by the way, for teachers, This is a marvelous era for you to look into because there was not only public school, there was the adult education program, which meant illiteracy programs plus lifelong learning. That was what was going on through the adult education, which was all the way down into the folk. And during those days, the Commonwealth wanted us to plant in our backyards. They wanted us to conserve extra fruit that had fallen rather than allowing it to just go to waste. They identified public health as important. And if public health was important, how do you get public health? By feeding the nation well, by feeding them what was nutritious. So they had this whole wonderful master plan that you might want to look into. Because again, it shows how the responsibility of the individual, the responsibility of the family, the responsibility of the neighborhood, all these social interactions, which are what we are studying and trying to develop in Araling Panlipunan, for the sake of the nation, which is the civics part of it, as citizens, not only because of uh, the personal relations, but because of being a citizen. All of this was food security. And again, we knew that the food was finite. It wasn't like the fiesta where it might go on forever. No, the food was finite. And if we wanted the food to last and we wanted everybody to eat well enough to stay well, to not get sick, to be able bodied, one had to be temperate. So that is why we are bringing up temperance again. And I hope that you might, if you have any questions, we can talk about it later on. So let's move to the next image, which summarizes part 2. And we explain that the history of food and beverage incorporates concepts of consuming only amounts that are physically healthy and thoughtful. Thoughtful for the neighborhood so that everybody has a share. And it is this self-discipline, this temperance, that can benefit how one person relates not only to the other people, but how you relate to yourself, how you think in terms of kindness and sharing, which, by the way, are crucial to understandings of applying sustainability into everyday life. So that is our second word. Now we get to the last part, the third word. I know it in the Cebuano pronunciation, which is naya naya. And I found this word in an 1800 dictionary, was very attracted to the word. And I said, well, let's study it some more. And let us see where this word is going to lead us. So let's move to the next image, because then you will understand why this word became one of my favorite words. Naya naya, when I first read about it, had two meanings. One was to entertain people, to feed people, to take care of people. And the second meaning was to be a happy person. So if you put them together, it's like the recipe for being happy is by entertaining, feeding, and taking care of other people. And I said, this just might be a very important word as a foundation for Philippine tourism, for all we know. So I studied the word a little more. And it was just last year when I participated in an international conference about the first circumnavigation of the world, where I met people from the University of London. And they revealed to me that they had the handwritten manuscript from 1628 of the priest named Alfonso Mentrida, who first wrote down the word naya naya. And so I said, well, gee, are you going to let me look at the original, the handwritten definition of Naya Naya? And they very kindly linked me up. And here I'm sharing with you in 1628. Naya Naya meant to entertain a guest, show goodwill, and enjoy oneself by welcoming people. Now, this is Cebu, no? This is Naya Naya in Cebu. Let's look at the next image. The next image says there is a word, manayanaya. And this is the disposition that one acquires by taking care of a guest. So they're very aware that if you do something for somebody else, something happens to you. Okay? There's this kind of relationship. It's a social relationship. Now, the host will become well conditioned, affable. The host will show goodwill. And the 1628 material also emphasized that one is to treat visitors and guests in a very friendly, good natured manner and easy to talk to them while seeking to be helpful and cooperative. So it was really taking care of guests. Okay, next image. So it turns out that the person who internalizes Naya Naya acquires that proper character exhibited in high principles and correct behavior that benefits the social self, that benefits one's interpersonal relations, that caters to the nurturing of one's interpersonal intelligence. And what it means is that a Filipino becomes happy by entertaining, caring, feeding other people. It's an application of pakikipagkapwa-tao. Now let's go to the next image because I'm very excited about the Q&A and your favorite foods. So the next image explains that Filipinos have been satisfying their hunger for friendships, their hunger for social gatherings, their hunger for being with other people by practicing Naya Naya. So to a Filipino, a meal is not only there to satisfy the physical hunger for the gutom. The meal is there to bring good cheer and happiness, to satisfy the emotional hunger and the social hunger. Next image. The Filipino meal feeds social hunger. Tradition dictates it's got to be happy, even if it's a simple meal, a frugal meal, or it's a luxurious meal, or even over the top and an ostentatious meal. All of them are meant to be happy, to make people happy, because the meal is actually, it is a menu not only of your favorite foods, it is a menu of social interactions. It is a menu of araling panlipunan. Let's look at the next image. Now, the Filipino food supply chain, we can also think of it as a happiness chain, meaning everybody who is engaged in that producing, processing, serving, consuming, and recycling of food on the food chain, everybody there, if they think of the philosophy of the Naya Naya, that means that they can be cherishing in their hearts the fact that they are participating in this wonderful Filipino concern for food to bring happiness, to bring joy. You see, they can think that they are part of this happiness chain. And the reward for being part of this happiness chain is what happens to you. The transformation, the individual transformation caused by the social transformation. So in other words, personal happiness. You get personal happiness by bringing happiness to others. I think this is such a wonderful Filipino word. This speaks so well of Philippine identity. Let's move to the next image because this is the important part. As we all know, any chain is as strong as its weakest link. And that was the philosophy of Manuel Quezon, by the way, in his desire to have education, adult education, continuing education, illiteracy programs, food literacy programs, and strong public education, because he knew that the incoming Philippine Republic, that the voters would only be as good as if they had little illiteracy. That was his issue. If there was too much illiteracy, then he knew he would not be getting the the expression of a republic, of a lot of people voting in the leaders that they really wanted. They wouldn't understand the issues, which is why the public education, adult education was important. I really beg of you as teachers to look into it because lifelong learning is something that we need so much today. Anyway, so any chain is as strong as its weakest link, and therefore the empowerment of Nayanaya as a strength of our culinary culture and as an example of a good part of our being Filipino, the empowerment benefits, I think, from a reality check. Let's all think about this. So this is where, thankfully, in a way, due to our pandemic, a lot of people never really thought about their food and where the food came from. I think they're now more appreciative of the farmers and the fishermen and the people who raise animals, the husbandry sector. Because unless we can help bring up that sector, the producers of the food, we will have a very weak link in our food supply chain, in our happiness chain. So we need to apply economic equity, environmental stewardship, and social inclusion. Those are fundamental to institutionalizing the Philippine food supply chain as a unique happiness chain. Let's switch another image. So connections of Nayanaya. Some of you are not Visayan. You don't speak Cebuano, you don't speak Hiligaynon, you don't speak Ilonggo. So the challenge that researchers like myself now have is, can we find a link between this Visayan Nayanaya? Can we find a link, a linguistic link into, let's say, Tagalog? And so now we're saying, well, we can invite, we will make anyaya to somebody. We want to invite them. But again, we can't find the link. We're still looking for that. But what is interesting is that if we look at Sanskrit, I'm not saying that Nayanaya comes from Sanskrit, so please don't get me wrong. But in Sanskrit, Naya means leading or a guide or that which is suitable or proper. And so, sometimes you say, well, we'll allow our imagination to go whichever way, and maybe Nayanaya, because remember, it's emphasizing. It's not just Naya. It's Nayanaya. It is like with an emphasis. When you double the word, like ganda ganda, kulit kulit, sarap sarap. So Nayanaya emphasizes specific action to make one happy. Nayanaya is a how-to word, and it says, want to be happy? Feed others and thereby spread happiness. And so we shift now to the next image, Alan, please. And we summarize this whole idea of Nayanaya as a concept of culinary culture. Nayanaya shows that Filipino food history actually is revealing to us that Filipino Culinary heritage is a heritage that seeks to bring happiness. That I think is one of the most beautiful, beautiful ideas that we can have about Filipino food and beverage on Filipino Food Month. And now we get to the last image. And here we remind that kaginhawaan, katimpian, and naya-naya or naya-naya, they expand the usefulness of food history beyond the appreciation of food origins, local food history, oral or anecdotal ancestral memories, charitable feeding, scientific reports, political legislation, and even master development plans. Food history documents people to people efforts to bring happiness and contentment through Philippine gastronomy. So I hope with that, you will now start thinking of maybe questions that you might like to bring to the table. Now that we're done with this little presentation of ours. I'm sure it's something a little different. It's not what you were thinking of as a food talk.
It's actually a really great kwan po. It's a really great presentation. I mean, I'm very inspired and I'm very very impressed with this presentation because you did not only well talk about food but even your research on food, and your research is very intensive. You've mentioned Doctrina Christiana, you've mentioned some Sanskrit words, you know, getting the etymology of Filipino words to categorize
Hard.
our food culture is very impressive. Really, to say the least, po, very impressive. So I am, yeah, I really like this because I'm in a way I'm kind of like a linguist also because I focus on language. So this is very important po that we have focus into these words. Opo. Um, so incorporating food culture to social studies. I believe there could be varying opinions. I know there are many ideas about this one. Um, how important is incorporating our food culture to our education system in the Philippines?
Well,
So,
food. Food is something everybody can understand.
mm,
Food is something that doesn't matter your age, your gender, your ethnicity. So if we want to explain the type of character, the character building, the
mm,
values education, no, we want to explain it, and we need to have examples. Sometimes it's just really easy to say, well, this person's starving. What are you going to do? You only have so much money. How are you going to prioritize what you're going to eat?
mm, mm,
There is a there's a catastrophe. How are you going to help? You know,
yeah.
it's very easy to take food because it's easy for us to understand.
Opo.
Sometimes, when we go into the more complex, what we consider to be complex challenges of a nation, or even complex challenges of a person, as we try to mature our mental, emotional, spiritual, physical being,
Mhm,
sometimes it's just too much to handle. But when you bring it down to, okay, can this person eat or not? If I do this, does that mean that that person will eat better?
mhm.
If I do this, if I eat this way, does that mean I'm not going to get sick, and I'm not going to have a big hospital bill? I'm
Yeah.
not going to be spending my retirement on medicine. And the government is not going to be spending to buy my medicine because I'm not going to be sick. The hospital is not going to get overloaded because not many of us are going to be sick because we tried very, very hard to follow whatever was the nutrition that was recommended. There's that kind of thinking. And all of that is because of the food sector. You see, even will I buy local or will I buy foreign?
Yeah,
Will I
that's
buy
a very
will
good
will
point.
I buy from within my neighborhood?
Yes,
See, now
opo,
we're
very
talking
good point.
carbon footprint. So
Yeah,
whether it's imported or it's foreign, am I going to buy within walking distance from my house?
that is a
That's
very good
part.
point po.
See, that's part of sustainability. And then if I have cookies, I have biscuit.
No,
Am I going to buy the biscuit? Okay, so I'm going to buy only within the area where I can walk. Okay, so maybe there's a little grocerette, maybe there's what you call like a 7-Eleven or something, a
mhm,
sari-sari store or a
yes, that is
palengke or
true.
a papa. Okay. Now, when I get there and there are two kinds of, let's say, biscuit, no? Am I going to buy the biscuit that is made by the little baker down the block who is a heritage comes from a heritage of bakers, and
Mhm.
this is the biscuit that his grandmother used to make, and he's just trying very hard to make ends meet
Yeah,
and keep alive this biscuit uh, bake
maybe.
shop of
Yeah,
his.
bake shop. Oo.
Okay, so am I going to buy that, or am I going to buy another kind of biscuit?
Mm.
So again, if you have, I mean, granting that they all taste good, no,
Mhm.
and they're all pretty much the same price, does that mean therefore that because I have a sense of place, I have loyalty to my community,
Mhm.
I know all the people in my little barrio or in my in my neighborhood. I know that baker's daughter goes to the same public school that I go to. I'm gonna buy. I
Yeah,
probably buy his biscuit.
it's local sustainability also. Yeah, it's local sustainability, and you're supporting those local. That's why there's always this like call to support local, and sometimes people don't understand how important that is in supporting local. When they're supporting local, they are supporting themselves also, being part of that community.
Exactly.
Um, and that's the same thing with, like, for example, food as our own culture. Food as an avenue to our cultural uh, and identity. They have to we need to see that in order for us to see how important food is, or how important that we also not just promote, but we tangkilikin natin yung sarili nating pagkain, right? For us to really understand more our culture and our identity. And there's a saying that says, a way to man's heart is through food is a way to man's heart. That's also a way to kind of encourage others to understand who we are as a people.
Yes.
Opo.
But see, the thing here is we tend to think of the tangibles, okay? Because there's like tangible heritage and intangible heritage. So the tangible heritage is that you can touch, that you can eat, which is why the food, the biscuits, the pancit, the
Mhm.
rellenos, the lechon, the whatever,
Yeah.
no? So that that is what we relate to, and we think of food as the tangible. Now, of course, the
Mhm.
intangible is the skill to cook, things like that, no? But the intangible is also those three words that I shared with you today. So the strength of our culinary culture is not only the food that we are eating, the fact that we are still cooking, still baking these
Mhm.
foods, and the fact that we are patronizing our Filipino restaurants, for instance, our Filipino bake shops. Okay, it's not only that. The strength of our Filipino culinary culture also lies in the fact that we want to bring joy to others through feeding. Now, because I think all of us, like you say, Ma'am naman, alam naman natin yan. Gusto naman
Mhm.
talaga natin magpakain ng tao, ganyan po tayo. Oo nga, ganyan tayo, alam natin. We feel it. But did we ever have proof? Did we ever know that there was such a word? That
Yeah.
in the beginning meant that?
Mhm.
Ginhawa. We're talking about mutual well-being. Now we're talking mutual well-being. That is a very complex and a very mature political and social and economic concept.
Mhm.
Mutual well-being. But our sense of that kaginhawaan, where did it start? Making sure nobody got hungry, feeding the body. So again, you see, our food has a lot to say if we will allow it to speak. So for those who like to study words,
Mhm.
I I encourage you to look at the words in your mother tongues.
Yes.
A lot of the sensitivities and the subtleties
Mhm.
of a community have sort of been lost because
Mhm.
the words have been lost or the
Yes.
words have taken on different meanings. Like that Naya Naya in 1935, it survived in an Ilonggo dictionary made by an American, and the definition of the Naya Naya was to be happy. Just to be happy. Nawala na yung connection to feeding other people.
Mhm.
Nawala yung connection to the social relationship, to the araling panlipunan content of
Mhm.
the word. Parang mababaw lang. Nawala
Mhm.
yung depth, the
Oo,
depth of
nawala
the
yun.
culture, hindi ba? Kasi, it meant to be happy. Hindi nga eh. It was more than that. It is to make others happy and from that make oneself happy. And so you are spreading happiness what? Through food, taking care of other people. So again, nawala yung depth. So I beg of you, if we want to really understand who we are as a people, we keep saying what is our national identity. That's our identity. It is deeper. It is deeper than that idea of naya naya is cheerfulness or happiness. No, 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 no. It is related to the food and the social responsibility that comes with trying to bring happiness to people.
Yes, I like that. I like what you said, Paul. I like that. That's I'm probably gonna quote you on that one. I really
By
like what
all
you said.
means, do.
Yes. We have Mom Celsius Wakon or Wachon, um,
Hi.
who is
Hello.
watching with us. She said, "Hi, Mom Felice. I like how food is connected with our psyche as Filipino people. How can we let foreign people feel they hold on a second. How can we let foreign people feel this psyche is our food or in our food so Filipino food will be increasingly known in the world? I am
Well,
asking this as a person involved in people to people diplomacy. Thank you.
well, people to people diplomacy, and we have what we call culinary diplomacy, which I'm sure you're all
Yes.
familiar with. Okay, lots of culinary diplomacy happening now, lots of trying to convince non Filipinos and third generation Filipinos who've never been to the country and then who come, trying to convince them that this is a wonderful country
Mhm.
and trying to convince them it's a wonderful country by having them like the timpla,
Mhm.
the taste of the food. But the success of food is not only the way it tastes, how it looks, how it's served, but it's also I mean, by presentation is what I meant by how it is served. It's also with the joy with which it's served.
Mm.
Sometimes a foreigner will not be able to put his or her finger on what it is that makes eating in the Philippines special. Because, they might say, I didn't exactly like what I ate, in truth. I might never order it again, but
Mhm.
I enjoyed my meal. I don't understand it, but somehow, even if I was ambivalent about the food, and I have my own comfort foods from my own country, and I must confess, I like my own food better, my country's food better. But then they'll say, there is just something about the way Filipinos serve their food. It's like this, they have this feeling. There's this energy, this positive energy, this happiness that surrounds us wherever we go. We go to some small beach. There's a little hut, and then there's this woman giving us turon or making us, whatever, barbecue. And she's smiling. We can't communicate with her. We don't speak her language. But she's smiling. We
Yeah.
smile back at her. So, in that sense, the spiritual is there. The reward is there through the smile. You cannot fake. You cannot fake sincerity.
Yes. Opo. That is very true. That is very true. I like that. I like that, po. And then this question, I know you've answered it already. How important is understanding our food culture in our daily life? You basically mentioned it already. You've mentioned about how food is finite. One has to be temperate, so practice being temperate, yung katimpian, that you've mentioned po, very important. There's this another question po, well, more on our identity. What is your opinion on our food identity is now slowly diminishing because of the foreign fad of food?
Okay. If you study Philippine culinary history, and I go all the way back, okay, as far back as there are written records and even some of the archaeological findings, and you put it all together, you know, our cuisine is like the cuisines of other people all over the world. It is never constant. Cuisine is never constant, it is not stagnant. It is something that is very likely to change. If the if the ingredients change, the dish will change. If the cooking procedure changes, there will be some alteration in the way the dish is accomplished. Now, we mustn't be afraid of the foreign food because we always give it a Filipino stamp. The strength of our being Filipino, trust me on this, is so obvious in our food. For instance, we are eating, let's say, pochero. Okay, I think pretty much every place in the country has some kind of a broth with the meat and some vegetables. I mean, that's just what pochero is. So if you look at the Spanish peninsular versions of pochero, they don't put the Asian cabbage. They use garbanzos. We didn't have garbanzos. The New World corn was brought here, and we have a recipe in 1918 that specifies we take the corn kernels off the cob because that is the substitute for the garbanzos. Okay, and then what happens? Look at champorado. Okay, our champorado is nothing at all like the atole in Mexico. What we have is the antique lugaw and then we add the chocolate to it. So we have a porridge. We don't have a
Yeah.
beverage. Okay. What
Mexico
happens
is
to the
special.
tamales? Oh, look at the tamales. Okay. Okay. When the missionaries came, we already had suman. Okay. We had rice cakes. Even Pigafetta during the time of Magellan talks about the rice cakes that were given during pagan rituals. Okay. And the early missionaries said, we have suman. Okay, we have suman. And then when they were looking for tamales, Mexican tamales, because it's a portable food. If you're a missionary and you have to carry your food around, and you learned about tamales for the 6 to 7 months that you were stranded in Mexico until the galleon arrived to pick you up. Okay, so you say, maybe they have this portable corn tamal in the Philippines because we can carry it wherever we go in our missions. No? Okay. And they say, there's no tamal. But they have something similar. They have suman. It's
Mm.
rice and it's wrapped in leaves and it's portable and it keeps just like the Mexican tamal. And then they said, but we kind of want tamal. So what happens? We take the suman and suman, which is the rice and the coconut milk, and then we put toppings. We put chicken, which is similar to some of the tamales, the tamal in Mexico, and then we keep adding and adding and adding as time goes on. Before you know it, our tamales has what? Chinese ham. It has chicken. It has hard-boiled egg. It has achuete. It has all kinds of things. In other words, we took a Mexican tamales, and we don't need to be scared that our suman is going to disappear. And we don't need to be scared of these tamales because we Filipinized the tamales just as we Filipinized the pochero. We're
Mm.
Filipinizing everything. You know, sometimes the strength of the culture is not that obvious. But
Mhm.
actually, like, okay, think of, just think of something like, let's say, a pizza. I think we all know that the pizzas are made all over in the Philippines, and they make all kinds of pizzas. Well, I mean, we also have this pizza that's got pork and chicken adobo in the pizza. You see, so don't worry about it. We have spaghetti coming in, and what have we done to the spaghetti? We have all kinds of
You make it
spaghetti.
sweet.
Well, not only that, we have the spaghetti with the crab roll,
Oh, that's true. That's
with
true.
that deadly high cholesterol, absolutely delicious crab
Yes.
roll. Aligi.
Yeah. Opo, opo.
So
I've heard
Filipino
about that one.
spaghetti is not just the sweet spaghetti, which is the commercialized kind of sauce, but we
Oh,
have all these other fancy types also, where we treat the spaghetti as if it were rice.
yeah.
And by the
Opo.
way, that is how we first treated corn. When the missionaries came, they said, okay, we've introduced corn. It's a good plant because in 40 days, if it takes in 40 days, you have corn to eat. Okay? So it's a very
Mhm.
important plant. Now, they said, but the Filipinos, they don't like to grind it down and make it into a flour.
Cornstarch. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
they don't like, no? They don't want to make pancake. In other words,
Mhm.
they don't want to make tortilla. What they want to do instead is they will roast it. Or what will they do? They will take it off, they will take the kernels off, they will mix it with the rice, and they will cook it until the corn is as soft as the rice. Because that is the way we eat.
So yeah, really, I wanna insert this question po because it's perfect with the topic. So this is called transculturation, wherein it's basically a process of cultural transformation marked by influx of new culture or elements, for example, like new food, and kind of like loss or alteration of existing ones. So, with that process of transculturation po, how does transculturation affect our social well-being?
Our social well-being. Well, again, this is where this is where we need to remember, okay, that we choose how we want to live.
Uh-huh.
We choose what food we're going to eat. We choose what ingredients we might alter in what we're going to eat. We might, for instance, say, well, we make this dish with chicken, but now we're going to make it with beef because there is beef available. Okay.
Mm,
Um, that's a choice. Now,
mm.
will it still seem Filipino? That is probably your question.
Yeah,
Now,
like our identity also at the same time. So
right.
it's like, how does it
Let,
affect
let
our
me give you
well-being?
an idea. Let me bring this further. Okay, so let's
Yeah.
say there's this dish. All right, tomato, as you probably well know, tomato is from the New World. It is a New World botanical that arrived here from Mexico.
Mhm.
And the original tomato that got to us was small, something like a cherry tomato, no,
Yeah,
something
natural
like it,
tomato.
but not quite the same, not the same variety as what we have now. And that cherry tomato registered as sour. See, that's why it can't be the cherry tomato. The cherry tomato is not sour. Okay,
Yeah, it's like a sweet. It's almost
it's a
sweet.
little sweet, right? That's why
Mm,
you eat it that way.
mm,
Anyway, the the first tomato that was introduced took to our environment. Almost all over north to south, it was growing, and it was growing wild. That's why we knew it took to the environment. It adjusted very, very well.
mm.
How did we use the tomato? We used it in dishes that needed sourness. And we were already cooking sour foods like
Sinigang.
sinigang. See? So
Yeah.
we take the tomato, let's say if maybe we made pang-asim, whatever, if it's
Yeah.
batuan or iba or whatever. But then this free tomato that's just growing anywhere, we take a
Anyway,
couple and we throw it into the pot.
so
And
it became permanent ingredients for sinigang.
yes. Now, who's to say that by putting that tomato, our sinigang was no longer Filipino?
Mm.
You see, so sometimes don't be a little too don't be too scared. We actually are making what we think is foreign. We're
Mm.
actually making it
Our own. Yeah.
Filipino.
Yeah.
It's just that we don't realize it sometimes.
Yes. Opo.
So
So don't.
we need to believe in ourselves. And even if we're cooking some like now, there's so much pasta. Okay. And pasta, think about it. The original pasta that got here is pancit. And pancit was so popular because it was stir fried, it was cheap. It got to the point where the pancitero could bring his portable stove, his portable kalan, to where there were a lot of people who were going to buy his pancit. And when they had
Mhm.
finished, exhausted, he carries his big kalan, he moves it again to another place, and he cooks his pancit there. Now, because pancit became a convenience food, it has survived, and it has survived in so many different variations because Filipinos like to be creative. You
Mm.
cannot say that there is only one way to cook, let's say, pancit bihon. You cannot. There's so many ways to make pancit bihon. And nobody's gonna say, "Why? How dare you tell me that I cannot make my pancit bihon this way?" Okay,
Yeah.
that's the Filipino nature, remember. We are actually we're strong. We push
Mhm.
our weight around. We really do. We push our weight around.
Yeah. Just like
So
adobo.
Indigenous.
exactly like adobo. Okay. Before I forget,
The
before I forget.
Filipino adobo.
Ay, nako, this adobo business. Okay. Allow me, please, to explain. We did not have the word adobo in our vocabulary. That was imported. The word is an import. The
Yeah.
word means a marinade. Yung ibababad mo, yung lulutuin mo sa adobo. Okay?
Mm.
The adobo is the pangbabad. Okay.
Mm.
Now, there are two ways, and this is documented. In that adult education program I was talking about earlier, the
Opo.
Commonwealth program, they had one booklet full of recipes. No? And in the adobo section, this is the proof that there, by the 1930s, there were two common ways to cook adobo. And I'm not talking about ingredients. You could make adobo out of chicken, out of
Yeah.
pork, whatever. But
Yeah.
this is two cooking procedures, okay? It's one cooking procedure, which is the Spanish type. In other words, you get your meat, your protein, and you put it into vinegar with
Mm.
spices, and you leave it there so that the vinegar now helps to soften the meat, right? Gives it a
Mm.
little flavor. You leave it there first, and then you continue to cook it. You braise it, okay? That's one kind of Filipino adobo. There is a second way of cooking Filipino adobo, which is in many cases the way that most or a lot of families cook adobo. What do? They get a pot, you put the vinegar in there, you put all the spices, the salt, whatever, and then you take your meat or whatever you want to make into Filipino adobo and you put it into the vinegar. You don't marinate it, you just cook it. That is the continuation of pre-colonial cooking, which is Filipinos cooking in vinegar, like we have paksiw,
Yeah.
isn't it? You have vinegar, you cook it in vinegar. So the strength and the continuity of the earlier Filipino cooking exists because of the two ways of adobo. You have a Spanish type of cooking adobo, and then you have a Filipino type of cooking adobo. And the Filipino type of adobo doesn't use any marinating at all. But it uses the word because a marinade is made with vinegar.
Yeah.
But this is the strength of the culture. The strength of the culture. We continue some of the ancient ways that we even forgot were ancient.
Yeah, that very important aspect po of trying to, well, also maintain I guess our own or our Filipino-ness, but like what you said, very important also to not be scared, and to adopt like different ways to do it. There's just one question po. We have a couple. We're gonna have two question, and we're gonna be done. We have one that is a message, and then one that's online. um, Fast-paced lifestyle brought about by modernization and rapid urbanization. Have we, as a race, lost the essence of enjoying the gastronomic experience? And then there's a follow-up question for that. Paul says, it seems we, more often than not, we just eat to satisfy hunger, that we do not take the time to savor the experience, as well as the connection we establish when we dine with others. Thank you very much po, Ma'am Felice. Sabi po
If
ninyo.
you think that's happening to you, then stop it.
Yes.
If you think that that is happening to your life, please eh, readjust. It's not worth
Yes.
it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Um, you've got to allow the meal. You've got to allow the meal to give you the time to enjoy it and to think about just the pleasures of it, and be grateful that you have something to eat.
Yeah.
Grateful for all the people who found the ingredients, who cooked the food, who
Mhm.
presented it, and who might even have to be the ones to wash your dishes if you don't wash them yourselves, and throw away your garbage and recycle all the paper, from the fast foods. No, it's see again, we forget. We say, oh, there's Philippine culture, there's Philippine heritage. Okay. But you see, culture is, okay, what do we say? What is culture? A way of life, how we live. Okay. Culture is culture is how we choose to live.
We live.
The
Okay.
way we live now is not the way, for instance, that people were living 20 years ago. Okay.
Hmm.
The way when I was a little girl, the way we were living is certainly not like the way we are living now.
Hmm.
The circumstances are different. Many of the foods are different, but we still cook our favorites up to now. Okay. But the point is, we choose. We choose, for instance, to make adobo. I choose to make adobo that is plant based.
Mm.
I'm actually a lacto oven vegetarian. Okay. My choice is an ethical choice. Eat lower on the food chain. Now, um, it's up to each one of us to decide how we want to live. And
Mm.
nowadays, thankfully, because we live in a political environment in many parts of the world where we can have these choices.
Yeah.
So how you choose to eat, the amount of time you give it, how much you want to spend for it, all of that you choose.
Yeah.
So take the beauty of now that you're allowed to choose.
Yes.
We
And
have the freedom to choose how we want to live, pretty much.
yes,
Pretty
that's
much.
very, very important. Well, culture is a choice. Culture
Yes.
is a choice. So, and that's the
Yes.
po.
We are making we now, this present is the past. It's going to be past. We
Mm.
are making somebody's past. That is
Mm.
part of the sustainability. See, we everything we do today is going to affect somebody's future. And
Future.
we're going to be in the past. We're not going to be around. But the choices we've made for how to live, and how we might how we want other people to live, those recommendations that we give, that is the choice we need to make very responsibly, including what we eat.
How about this question, Paul? This is going to be the last question, and it kind of like flows in a little bit onto our topic because it's like, yes, it's a choice. Food is our choice. Food is our, I mean, culture is also our choice. How about looking at our exotic Filipino food? Maybe when I hear exotic Filipino food, siguro I'm thinking of maybe something that I don't know what's a good example of exotic Filipino food. That is mentioned that we can refer to. But it says, Celsius said, how does this type impact on how other cultures see us, or how can we avoid our food being stereotyped because of possible dislike of exotic foods? So maybe I'm thinking as exotic food is ano ba yung
Maybe
exotic food?
balot?
Balot siguro, yeah, that's a good.
Do
That's
you
good.
mean balot?
Mm-hmm.
we're not the only ones who have balot.
Yeah.
Um, well, in terms of exotics, first of all, some exotics are illegal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
So
the
some of them are illegal. And
Mm-hmm.
some of our traditional foods that we used to eat all the time, we can no longer eat because we don't have those animals anymore.
Hanging around. Opo.
For instance, tapang usa. Like when you read Noli Me Tangere, and then they talk about the deer and the boar and
Yeah.
all these things that they were
Yeah.
eating. We don't have that anymore because we don't have the forests. We don't have that kind of a lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
anymore. No, we don't. So certainly, certain things out of our heritage are going to disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we cannot fight it because sometimes it's for good. I mean, like people used to eat monkey brain. They get the real live monkey, they put the monkey under the bottom of the table, and then they
Mm-hmm.
cut the brain out and they eat it raw. Now,
Yeah.
that's really exotic. That's not here. Okay, that's not in
Yeah.
the Philippines. But that is
Dogs
now
also are
banned.
eaten. Azucena.
Now, those things are banned. They are
Mm-hmm.
banned for ethical reasons. So again, the ethics changes. Animal welfare changes, in addition to maybe health issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be open to that. I think what I have found a little problematic is like we have friends who really want to try, let's say, balot, no? So we ask them, would you like to try? And like Via Mare, Glenda Barreto has taken the balot and she's turned it into a wonderful soup, and she even has another one like a casserole. Um, in other words, how do I explain this? We can offer foods that to them might be exotic and that to us are not exotic, okay? But we need to do it in such a way that we respect them and we respect the food.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Very
Uh,
important.
I think if we, like when you make loco loco, when we try when you try to make loco loco to this poor foreigner, and I dare you, and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it it makes our culture look a little, well, not the best. Um, this is because this is all very subjective. I'm sure you'll
Mm.
uh,
Yes po. Opo.
allow me to apologize because clearly I have my own thoughts, which
Yes.
I'm
Opo.
not trying to force on anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But you remember we were talking about kaginhawaan and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we need to have moral rectitude, that we need to respect people. That's why we want to bring them happiness, and we want to have the farmers and the fishermen and everybody, we want them to have a fair deal. Remember, we were sort
Mm-hmm.
of talking about all of that. Maybe this is one way to end the night.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when the National Commission for Culture and the Arts was being established in 1992, this was already as legislated. Okay, so some of us were among the very first commissioners for the National Commission for Culture and Arts, and for many of us, uh, it was like a beautiful moment, like the climax of an advocacy that you had wanted to see happen. And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly it was there. And so culture suddenly became important. The arts became important. I mean, there were so many things, so many opportunities that having a commission for culture and arts could open up for the country in the future. And so in those days, you say, okay, well, what's culture? And the standard definition then, and even in the international community, culture is the way people live. Okay, but um, a colleague of mine who was also a commissioner, we both looked at each other and we said, as a commission, we need to make it clear that culture, our heritage of culture, includes good things and bad things. It includes useful things and things that are now out of date. How do we help people to make their choices? Which of these many inheritances are they going to accept as their own, love, and conserve because they love it? Pass it on because they think they love it and it's important. So, I remember we didn't sleep that night. We were in Palawan and just the two of us, we were talking until daybreak. And we came up with this very idealistic idea that the kind of way of life, the kind of choice we would recommend for continuing some kind of Philippine culture, it should be the culture that it must be that which is honorable and excellent, right? It should be yung pamana. I'm thinking back, my gosh, ang pamana ng kagalingan
Mhm.
at ang pamana ng karangalan.
Mm.
So the inheritance or the heritage of that which is excellent and honorable or noble, that is what we should be choosing. Forget the bad stuff. If we want to be respected individually and as a nation, then we choose what is excellent in what we do, what we make, and honorable in how we do it. Honorable in our social relations. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. It's
Mm.
back to the KKK. You
Yeah,
cannot have kaginhawaan for everyone unless you follow the straight route, unless there is moral rectitude. I,
I like that, po.
I end my opinion with that.
Yes. I think we just we could pull out our we're gonna revise our mission and vision from what you said here in at Kapua po. Pamana ng kagalingan at karangalan, and we should be focused on that in as far as trying to well uh, pass on our cultures to our younger ones, that they should focus on those two. And I'm with you po. I'm with you with that. I completely agree. Kagalingan at karangalan is something that we should pass up because, as we all know it, not all cultures. I mean, we are of course proud of our cultures as Filipinos, but there are some cultures that we have as Filipinos that, it's a little bit um, off at one side. Di po ba?
Well,
Um,
that's it. You think of the other person. That's what all these
yes,
three food terms are talking about. You don't
that's
just
why
think of yourself.
we changed also the kultura po. That's why we changed our name to Kapwa. To
Yes.
it focuses more on our fellowship, and it focuses more on our pagiging tao at pagiging kapwa tao.
Yes.
So that's why we change our name from kultura to kapwa. Um, oh my gosh, I one of our viewers said, I can sit through a 12-hour course dinner with our guests and still need more time to listen to what she has to say about our culinary history. We have a lot to learn from you, Po, and honestly, this has been one of the most educational uh, conversations that we've had here in Colecteratura, and we appreciate you as our guest. Ma'am Andre right now is trying to come in because she just
I'm
was
here.
logged. There we go. Ma'am Andre,
I'm
how are
Yes,
you?
here.
Ma'am Andrea.
Ma'am Andre,
Hi,
thank
thank
you
you.
so much.
That's a wonderful discussion. Tama po yung viewer natin na hindi talaga tayo matatapos pag culinary history or culinary talk ng pag-uusapan natin kasi masyadong hitik sa kasaysayan, hitik sa kultura po, at hitik sa pagiging makatao at pagiging identidad bilang Pilipino po. Tama po. Kaya ang nakikita ko kanina po is yung word na indigenization po ng food.
Mm,
We
yeah.
Filipinos indigenize food po.
Yes, really, really great po. Really, really great part of transculturation. And Um, really good po. I hope sa mga teachers po natin, si yan, tinuruan uli po tayo ng ways how we could incorporate things of our cultures that we could incorporate to our teaching. And that's always something that we should appreciate as teachers because, you know, adding the our cultural aspects to our lesson plan is definitely a must. I mean, for me, a must. Whatever you're teaching, whether it's science, whether it's psychology, whether it is well, all the more if it's history, yeah, even if it's language. See, ngayon we've learned about language also. Um, use our term, use our Filipino term, and I like how Ma'am Felice also brought up about the word Tagalog instead of Filipino. How Jose Rizal, Andres Bonifacio used Tagalog, and she explained why. And I really appreciate that. These are things po that are very valuable in our teaching. And I hope sa mga teachers po natin, we've learned a lot. Katulad ni Ma'am Andre. Ma'am Andre uses these videos to teach her students po.
Yes
Yeah,
po.
and I encourage all our teachers also to do the same. Use these videos. I know this was probably going to be a 2 hour, just exactly the time that you have for your students. Have them go through this video and talk about it, write an essay about it, or anything like that. But we can promise to you that your students will learn something about our culture and even beyond. Opo.
Yes
So
po.
I hope that this episode will again serve its purpose in your classrooms.
Yes, definitely po. Kasi, Sir Alan, na-notice ko kanina, ito pong talk ni Ma'am Felice, parang hindi na ito yung basic na who, what, and who ang for W's. Ito rin po
Yeah.
yung higher order thinking skills na dapat na
Yes.
ipaabot natin sa mga bata, hindi lang yung who, what, where, when. Pero
Mhm.
yung ginhawa, yung ginagamit talaga yung utak para mapakita yung essence ng food sa ating history, hindi lang sa
Yes.
dates or the function of dates or person, but the essence of it po.
I completely agree po. And then our viewers are very thankful, those who are viewing po, magmula kanina and who stuck around to watch our presentation po. And to those who will watch this later on, you will also get a chance to get a certificate. Ma'am
Yes
Andre,
po.
go ahead. And
Yes po. Sa mga kapwa ko guro na gusto ng certificates at panood po kayo ng edisyon ng Colecteratura at lahat ng programa ng kapwa po. Bukas po meron po dokyo komentaryo. At ngayong gabi po yung kultura code natin is KC 345. Again, KC 345. Go to our website and go to forms and events para makapag-register kayo at para makakuha kayo ng event certificate po from Kapwa. Again, tomorrow po, Dokyo Komentaryo at 7 o'clock in the evening. If-feature natin yung international tribe from Indonesia naman po. Maraming salamat po mga kakultura. Ma'am
yeah.
Felice, maraming salamat po sa pag-accept ng invitation ng Kapwa.
Yes po, Ma'am Felice, thank you so much po. Ang dami po naming natutunan po sa inyo. And hopefully, we get to see you in person when we have a in-person uh, event for Kultura po. Someday, we're looking forward to that. Hopefully, we can make that a big event po and we can invite you sa ating pong meet-up.
Thank
Um, Opo. Thank you so much everyone. Good night sa inyong lahat dyan. Good morning dito sa Washington, D.C. And sa inyo po dyan sa Quezon City po, Ma'am Felice, thank you so much again for sa pag-unlock po ninyo sa aming imbitasyon. Uh, Thank you po everyone. Maraming
Thank you.
salamat
See
po.
you
Good night,
tomorrow night po.
Philippines.
Night.
Good
Thank
night
you.
po.
Good
Good night po.
night. Good night. Bye bye.
Good night. Bye.